attended the same school and university until then. We diverged and we converged again. The AUB chess champion had become the champion of banks in the USA and other parts of the world. Then he spent 16 years in various senior positions in banking, rising to managing director within 7 years of graduation. His last position was CEO and chairman of the board of Standard Chartered Bank. Prior to that, he worked at Bear Stearns, now JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, Merrill Lynch, and UBS in all the major global financial hubs. Funded with a full scholarship, Danny earned his bachelor's degree in mathematics at AUB. Then he attended the University of Illinois, where he got his master's in applied math. He then worked in non-profit organizations in the fields of communications and information systems, and was awarded a research grant that funded all his graduate studies. After that, he went to Columbia University, where he earned an MBA and transitioned from there into the banking career. Then his other interests include fitness, as in running, motorcycling, skiing, and also travel. He also holds a private pilot's license. Then he has been extensively involved in philanthropy and volunteering, and among others, has set up a scholarship for needy students at both AUB and IC. He was the executive producer of a documentary in the year 2012. Danny is currently, quote-unquote, retired and enjoying quality time with his family and the freedom to explore the world and his own mind. Please welcome Danny Azzi.
Thank you, Professor Hamdan. Listening to the biography, I thought I was in the wrong room. I was going to just walk out and apologize for not being able to give my talk to hear this guy here. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I didn't expect this many people, as a matter of fact. You know, hi, Mom. No, that was a joke. She's not that young. Okay. Instead of this sounds like a biography. Instead of talking about myself, which is a bit narcissistic, I'm only gonna talk about myself in areas where I think it would be useful for you guys. You know, in terms of the experience we shared when I was in your shoes back in 1980. Did you hear that? So I just want to share with you what, you know, the preconceptions and the preconceived ideas I used to have when I was sitting in your shoes versus, you know, what it's like in the real world. This is not necessarily just about math. How many math majors here? And how many business majors? Okay. And how many neither of the above? Okay. So anyway, what I wanted to talk about is the fact that whenever we're born, we're stuck within a box which gives us physical limitations to what we are able and not able to do. Every single person here is like that. What I mean by that is, for example, if you're born in a place like Bangladesh, where the per capita income is $70 a month, if you are able to make it to Lebanon and work as a maid making $150 or $200 a month, you've basically made it. And if you're born in Lebanon, where the per capita income is, say, $6,000 or $7,000 a year, and you are able to get to the US, where the per capita income is $56,000 a year, the moment your plane lands on the tarmac, automatically you've increased your earning potential to the per capita income, right? Automatically, just by landing on that tarmac. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that because of who our parents are, our religion, our neighborhood, even within the country, this puts certain limitations, both a floor and a cap on where you can reach in life. So what I want to talk about a little bit today is how do we expand those boundaries a little bit? How do we expand out of these physical limitations we are born with? But there are also theoretical limitations, self-imposed limitations. through preconceived notions and so forth. For example, when I was in Lebanon, at your age or a bit younger, there were really 4 viable professions that we tried to achieve. Being a physician, medical doctor, an engineer, lawyer, and military officer, right? Those were the 4 professions that you sought after. As a result of this brainwashing, if you will.
They still are.
They still are, it doesn't change. As a result of that, though, the amount of supply of these professions is such that there's absolutely no way that this country can employ 100% of them, or even if we export the talent outside. By the way, with engineering, civil engineering was the one, right? Huh? Now more than ever, okay. So similarly to everyone in the country, these are the professions that I was seeking to join. However, I like math. So what I did was I applied to AUB in electrical engineering, which was in itself a rebellion at the time. Why electrical engineering? Because that's the one that has the most math out of the engineering fields. And I applied as a math major, and I told my parents I was a pre-med student in math. So I got accepted in both. I went into math, and I actually went through the pre-med. I took all back then there were 34 credits. Biology, chemistry, botany, zoology, blah, 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 to do the pre-med stuff. Of course, once I took a botany class, and that was the first and only D I ever got in my life, I realized that I didn't want to learn about, Latin terms and memorize diagrams and stuff like that. It was just totally uninteresting to me. So at that point, and this is where May and I met, we switched to graduate school, and we wanted to pursue a PhD because that was the only thing I knew as my ticket out of the country. So back in those days, this is when I moved to the US to study at a place called the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And at that time, part of the objective was to try to self-finance. So as part of looking for a job, looking for a way that pays for school, I saw an ad, and the ad was at this laboratory called Construction Engineering Research Laboratory. I saw an ad there. They wanted somebody with a bit of chemistry knowledge, so the pre-med came in handy there. We went in, we did an interview, and the position actually was very boring sounding, which is to test paint samples. You know how they paint locks and dams in developed countries. So these paints, you can't paint them every year, otherwise you lose power and electricity and so forth. Unlike here, they can't just cut off the electric supply twice a year to paint. So the paints have to last for 30, 40 years. That's how many times they do it. So they do a lowest bidder for the paint in the US, and but when the bidder wins, they do testing, gas chromatographic analysis, etc., to make sure that the paints comply with federal specifications. This was the job, very sort of specialized, not something in school that you think I'm going to do this when I grow up, right? Got the job, paid my tuition, paid me a salary, and so forth. And this is sort of how I got into the real world. Anyhow, I'm not going to get into the details of it. It's actually a pretty interesting story because that's how I got into applied math and other stuff where you apply math in the real world. But the point of the whole thing is that our environment where we grow up limits the possibilities in your mind of what you can and cannot do. So, of course, most of life is luck. 99.9%. What Warren Buffett refers to as the ovarian lottery. What I was mentioning about where you're born and so forth. The 0.1% is where we can influence events and where we can do what we need to do. So, as far as careers in math, when I moved overseas, I discovered that there are careers in math in operations research, actuarial studies. For example, how do they price life insurance policies? Why is your life policy more expensive than hers? Do you know why? No, you and her. Assume same age. Why is yours more expensive? gender, for example. So they go by statistics because the life expectancy of a man is 4 years. It used to be 7 years, now it's 4 years as women get more and more into the workforce. So your policy would be more expensive than hers, right? Now, if you wanted to buy a retirement annuity, i.e. you want to give them money when you're 60 so that it'll pay you a salary for the rest of your life, who has to pay more now? You have to pay more. So the reverse. So at the beginning you have an advantage. If you're buying life insurance, you have an advantage. If you are receiving a retirement annuity based on an immediate payment, then he's got the advantage, right? Because his life expectancy is low. These are some of the applications, for example, that in the real world that a math major uses. Another one is the traffic control of all these airplanes. All the airplanes. That's operations research. It's optimizing all the traffic flow so that it maximizes the usage of the airspace without them running into each other, right? Of course, in computer science. Who's the biggest employer of mathematicians in the world? Who knows? No Google. Which organization? What organization? Name it. No.
Aerospace?
Huh?
Aerospace?
I'll give you a hint. The organization, its existence was a secret until 1958. National Security Agency. يعني مخابرات الأمريكية. Biggest employer of mathematicians in the world. Why do you think they need mathematicians? Huh? Cryptography, exactly. The codes when somebody's talking on the phone, the cryptographic codes that are used to, so if somebody's listening to the conversation they don't understand, like is all based on mathematics. For example, if you know the highest prime number, if this country knows the highest prime number and other countries don't know what the highest prime numbers are infinite, right? If somebody knows the highest prime number today, they can create a code that is based on that number that no one can crack, right? Does that make sense? Professor? So these are some of the applications of, and of course, you guys have been reading in the press today, they're trying to break into the guy's phone. You know, all of that stuff is developed by mathematicians. But more importantly than what can a math major and not do, we're back to the boxes that I was telling you about, that we are in because we're born that way, and boxes we put ourselves in. The fact of the matter is, what I discovered when I was, when I traveled overseas, was basically that actually there's no one major that has an advantage. People don't, in Lebanon we always think about university as a vocation. As a vocation. You go to school to learn stuff that you will use on the job, right? Which may be true for medicine, at least after Med 1, after 4 years. But in fact, what I discovered, that in the outside world, the college degree is you go there to earn knowledge, to earn a way to think, and so forth. And then the job is something totally different. And you use maybe 2 or 3% of what you learn in college on the job. So for example, in banking, there's no such advantage as someone who has a math major in physics or literature or whatever. In fact, you see majors from all walks of life. Like when I was in business school, which is how I ended up working on Wall Street, the people came from all kinds of majors and all kinds of professions, by the way. One of the requirements to get into an MBA in an Ivy League school is 4 years of experience, on average. And we had people we had one photographer, for example. We had people from banking. We had people from government. We had people from non-profit organizations. It was all an eclectic mix of people that I got in. There was no one major that had an advantage over anyone else. So, and then how do these guys get into these schools? Okay, so this is the part that I give you a little bit of advice for. So in Lebanon, we have a tendency to look at grades as the number one decider, if you will, of how to get a job or whatever. The problem with that is if you rank the people in this room, let's say there's 150 people here, if you rank them from 1 to 150, how many number ones are there? 1. So that if grades and academic success is the main criteria to get a job, there's one person. Who's the number one student in math? Is it a girl or a boy? I don't want to keep saying he or she.
We can't say.
He or she. مين أعلى عليه؟ Let's she. She. Okay, he. She. All right, I'll say she. So there's only one number one in the class, right? So the number two, not number one, but come in. They have an advantage, right? But what happens to number 50? Is that person on number 50 going to say, I'm in the top 33% of my class? Is that as attractive? Okay, so... لا بالعكس عم بفتح لك اياها. So if you use those rules, if you play by the number one person's rules, you're going to lose, right? So then you need something else. You need what I call, not what I call, it's been named before, the USP. Who knows what a USP is? What does it mean here? Who knows what it means in the business world? Hello? Unique selling proposition. You knew everything else. Unique selling proposition.
He thinks I'm a student.
Unique selling proposition. Your unique selling proposition. What do you have? What do you have that no one else in the room has? The USP. You have to distinguish the USP. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Okay, so let's say that you are Harvard Business School, trying to decide whom among you I'm going to admit, or even a company after Harvard Business School. So in Lebanon, we have a tendency to say, okay, the guy who's on the dean's list, number one out of blah blah blah, that's it. Except there's only one number one, really. How do the other guys get in? Is it by reverse ranking? Is it that simple? You know, or is it something else? Well, the question is, it's about how do you market yourself? How do you present yourself on the CV? I'll give you an example. I had a guy in my class when I was in high school who was in the Difa' Madani, civil defense. So when one of these notorious car bombs took off, this guy walked out, he was 16 years old, he walked out of class to basically treat the dead and wounded. So here, assume a guy like this, a guy is saying that, hey, I'm number one, I have a GPA of 3.99 on his application. This other guy says, I have a GPA of 3.0, but I'm also a volunteer for the civil defense. You know, last week there was a car bomb, I saved 3 lives. Wow. You know, you see what I'm saying? Or I'm a, I ran the marathon in the 26.2 miles in 3 hours, or, you know. In the real world, the way employers, the way I employ people, isn't just based on the academic qualifications. In fact, it was a minor thing. When you're doing an interview, you know all the data, right? What's the interview for? They do something called in employing people. They look at something in the real world. They look at something called the airport test. Who knows what the airport test is? The airport test is, let's say we're traveling together on a business trip, and the flight gets canceled. And I have to be stuck for 8 hours with you in the airport. Is this the person I'm going to be stuck with? This is how it happened. Huh? Marriage test? This brings us to another point. What is the most important subject in school for success, in my opinion? Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Civic engagement.
Huh?
Civic engagement.
Topic تدرسها بالمدرسة.
Oh, topic.
شو أهم شيء؟ physics, chemistry, math, engineering. What's the most important topic? Huh? Must be class judgment, right?
Languages.
English.
Communication, languages. Languages. That is the your command of the language of business, which in this case is English. That is probably the most important topic that you study. When you write a memo and it's got grammatical mistakes or it's not understandable, guess what? Game over. You're never gonna become a CEO or chairman of the board of a company. Like we have one we have one here right now, and I think he would agree with what I'm saying.
40% of CEOs are English natives.
It's not like in Lebanon we think scientifique, the more scientific you are. By the way, my dad used to tell me this, and I didn't believe it when I was your age and younger. But what I learned later on, it's how you communicate, how you write your memos, today's emails, that stuff. This is what distinguishes you from the next guy. Because the technical part, like for example, I'm not the most technical guy. People might think here that I'm some kind of a technical genius. I'm not. I used to hire that. I used to hire a guy that did that. Here's another one. The technical expertise, for example, have you ever seen, how many PhDs run companies? Not many. Usually, in the same thing in the military, how many, for example, in the military organizations, by the way, are always an example for how the civilian world works. If you look at the generals that rise, it's always the generals. The guy who's not specialized. The guy who's specialized is a warrant officer. ضابط مؤهل بالعربي. You know, ضابط مؤهل, this guy can never be the commander of the army. This is the equivalent PhD in the military, by the way. The PhD will end up running the R&D department, but the CEO is always a generalist. Right? So what I'm trying to say, I guess, here is it's not about necessarily math major or business major or whatever. You know, the point of the school is for you to expand your mental capacities, your ability to think and analyze, to make sure that your command of the English language, or whatever language you use for business, has to be pristine, has to be perfect. That is what will get you ahead more than, you know, knowing how to solve Fermat's last theorem by heart. Are you looking for a career change, Polo? Okay. But by the way, in terms of one of the misconceptions we have, you know, is about if you go to Harvard, Columbia, Ivy League, blah blah blah, you know, that you are now a genius or whatever. You know, the stuff that I'm talking about today is really addressed to the middle 80. Actually, middle 80, and it's not the top 10%, not the bottom 10%. The bottom 10% are hopeless, right? The top, and I'm using 10%, but it could be 1%. Don't take the numbers literally. The top guys, you know, the Bill Gates of the world, right? He doesn't need school. He doesn't need Harvard. The guy drops out, sets up a multi-billion company, and blah blah, and that's it, right? It's back to the middle 80. How does the middle 80 move that box that I was talking about? You know, the box that you're stuck in, and it's telling you how far you can rise, or even how low can you sink. That's the one I'm talking about, right? Another example that I was talking about in terms of USP, unique selling proposition. So if you're a guy, you know, if you're a guy that is, you know, his parents went to top university in Lebanon, his mother went to the top university in Lebanon. He is, you know, the parents are very well off. He doesn't have to worry about money. He's got the car. He's got all that. And he's number one in his class. But then there's another guy who lives, for example, in an underprivileged area. Let's say in Tripoli. Tripoli, by the way, the per capita income there is lower than most of the third world. Some guy lives in Tripoli on the demarcation line where there's daily skirmishes, and this guy has to travel every day to Beirut to go to the school. He has to probably work part-time, 20 hours a week, somewhere to be able to pay for the school. Right? You know, on a resume or cover letter, which one is more attractive to a place like Harvard or even an employer post-Harvard? Exactly. So it's about أكيد.
لا for هارفرد إذا بيو راح على هارفرد أكيد هو بيفوت على هارفرد.
لا. They want that the Harvard, they want diversity. I can tell you, I was never a straight A student. I got into Columbia. I got into Columbia on the basis of my story. It's not a theoretical.
I'm that out. I'm saying in general, Ivy League school, it plays a big role if you come from a family that came to the same.
It plays a role, but not an exotic, interesting story plays a bigger role. I mean, I am on the admissions committee. I can tell you that. It's not a theoretical statement. I am inside one of the decision makers. I can tell you that interesting story is more important. Yes, all else being equal, if you are an alumnus of Harvard, your parents are, then you get in, sure. But the exotic, interesting story is more important. There's a third part as well. They also pick. Remember, there are statistics that we look at. When I went to Columbia, one of the things I looked at is percentage of people with jobs. So 97, the statistic that I read back then, 97% of people found jobs 3 months before graduation. Average, back in those days, average starting salary was 6 figures. Number of job offers per student, 3. Okay? The increase in salary doubled between pre and post Columbia. These are the kinds of things I was looking at as a prospective student. However, you got to look at it the reverse way. The reverse way is that university, when they admit you, one of the things they look at, what's the likelihood you're going to end up making that salary and to be part of that statistic? So the Ivy League thing is part of that. They know that the daughter or son of an Ivy League, so it's about that. But it's not just that. It's also, if you get out, they don't want you to be unemployed, because that 97% goes down to 93%.
Also applies to certain fields.
This also applies to certain fields of employment. I was running a construction group, and I always favored students from Balamand or the Lebanese universities, those at the UB, because they were hungrier and they worked harder, and they didn't want to become managers the first day they entered the company. So the same thing, I think, it applies to families.
And they were cheaper. I was trying to save money. Back to the story. It's you know those essays that you write and all that stuff. This is all about the USP. How do you distinguish yourself? Why are you more attractive than than someone else? So for example, when I was applying for jobs, I would write my CV in such a way that if someone was reading it, and they take about 10 seconds to read a CV, when they look at it, you know what? I want to meet this guy. This is how this. I want to meet this, even if they don't need to hire you. Sometimes, you know how sometimes they'll advertise a job where they have somebody in mind for it? So part of what you want to try to do is market yourself in a way that they want to meet you anyway, and maybe they'll just change their mind about the person they have in mind. The other thing that, as part of getting out of the box that you place yourself in, there's so many preconceived notions. For example, I'll give you an example. So, back to the pedigree thing you're talking about. I'm going to give you an example of a friend of mine. So, a friend of mine. So, I went to IC, I went to AUB, I went to Illinois, I went to Columbia. So, the pedigree from way in the beginning to So this guy was from a town. This is a real guy. He's from Salhiyya. I'm from a town called Damour. Now Damour, Salhiyya relative to Damour relative to Salhiyya is like Las Vegas. You know what I'm saying? Right? So this guy was from Salhiyya. He was studying BT1, BT2. Who knows what that is? BT1, BT2. He was studying BT1, BT2. So I'm IC. He's BT1, BT2. Right? So this guy from BT1, BT2 goes to Germany. Samir Tarfu goes to Germany, studies engineering in Germany while he's bartending to make his own money. Then he goes to, I think, Rhode Island or something like that, does a master's degree in engineering. Then then they send him back to Germany, General Electric, GE, sends him back. He's running now 100 Germans in Germany. And then after the 4 years at GE, he's in Columbia Business School doing an MBA, and that's where I met him. And you see what I'm saying? How this guy, the boxes that I'm talking about, this guy shattered all the stereotypes of boxes. Would you ever imagine a guy that did BT1, BT2 مهنية in Salhi, getting a master's in engineering, let alone, he worked at McKinsey. Who knows who McKinsey is? He worked at McKinsey as well, by the way. And who's Alan? And so forth. Would you ever imagine a guy from Salhi, BT1, BT2, ending up like that? Huh? If this guy listened to the conventional wisdom, and I'll bet you before I told the story, 100 of you would never guess that a guy from BT1, BT2 from Salhi will end up working at places like this. By the way, if you meet him today, you think he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. You think he's some bourgeois that spent all his life in Rabi or something. Like you cannot even tell what his original pedigree was. Right, I'm going to open it for questions. Identify yourself, please, and.
Leila Isa. I want to ask you if you actually do statistics on the origins, let's say, or where do graduate students in the US come from? Where will they come from the most?
It depends on. Okay, I'm not an expert on this, it's academic, but my guess is that in the sciences, for example, in math or engineering, you'll find a lot of foreigners. There have been statistics done that say maybe over 50% are foreigners. Okay, and the foreigners that are there, usually a lot of them are from China or India.
Foreign born.
But with respect to the box, where do they fit?
Very good question. With respect to they have the box of the country they're born in, and the religion, and all that stuff, right? But, in general, they're going to be middle class.
Yeah, what I'm
The bourgeoisie is not going to go do a PhD, usually.
Yeah.
So it's usually upper middle,
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that this concept is expanding nowadays. It's true, it's very relevant to Lebanon. And,
concept is
that being in the box, just doing engineering, being poor, being rich, it's still very applicable in Lebanon. But if you look at the scale of the whole world, these boundaries are being shifted.
For sure, that's my
More
point.
and more people
That's
outside of the box.
But that's exactly my point. My whole point about talking to you guys is because I was in that box. And like I said, there's parts of the box you can't move.
Yeah.
For example, can you afford to pay for Harvard? You cannot move that box if you don't have a full scholarship, right? But you can certainly move the box that says you cannot be an engineer if you're a BT1. Right? Or you cannot make a living outside of teaching if you are a math major. And there are